Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiant, staring at the view screen that showed nothing but empty space. His hands gripped the railing in front of him, knuckles white with tension. Behind him, the crew worked quietly at their stations, checking weapon systems and shield generators for the 100th time that day. Everyone knew what was coming. Everyone knew that humanity's future would be decided in the next few days. The message had arrived 3 days ago. The Galactic Council, those 12 ancient alien races who controlled most of the known galaxy, had given humanity an ultimatum. Surrender all military ships and weapons, become a protectorate under Council control, or be wiped out completely. They had given humanity 72 hours to decide. Now, only a few hours remained. Jake thought about his family back on Earth, his wife Kate and their 2 children living in Colorado, probably watching the news right now, probably scared. The whole planet was scared. For 50 years, humanity had been part of the galactic community, but they had never been treated as equals. The Council species looked down on humans, called them primitives, laughed at their fusion-powered ships and simple kinetic weapons. To the Council, humanity was nothing more than children playing with toys. The door to the bridge slid open, and Captain Lisa Warren walked in. She was a tall woman with short blonde hair and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. She had been humanity's chief diplomat for the past 10 years, spending countless hours in negotiations with Council members, trying to secure better treatment for human colonies, better trade agreements, better anything. It had all been useless. The Council gave humanity scraps and expected gratitude in return. Any word from Earth? Jake asked. Lisa shook her head. President Carter is still in emergency sessions with the cabinet, but we all know what the decision will be. Humanity doesn't surrender. We never have, Jake nodded. He had expected that answer. Humanity had faced extinction before in their history, back when they were confined to one planet. They had faced world wars, nuclear weapons, climate disasters, and asteroid impacts. Each time they had survived through stubbornness and innovation. This time would be no different, even if the odds seemed impossible. The Council fleet is gathering above their capital world. Lisa continued. Intelligence reports say they have over 10,000 warships. They're making a show of it, broadcasting their strength across every communication channel in the galaxy. They want everyone to see what happens when you defy the Council. 10,000 ships. The human fleet had 300. Simple math said this was suicide. But Jake knew something the Council didn't. Something that humanity had kept secret for 20 years. Across the galaxy, in a hidden facility orbiting a frozen moon in the outer rim of human space, Admiral Kyle Bennett walked through the corridors of the most advanced military base ever built by human hands. The base didn't appear on any official records. The ships being constructed here didn't exist in any database. Even most of humanity's government didn't know this place existed. Kyle was a stocky man in his 50s, with gray hair and a face marked by decades of military service. He had been chosen to oversee Project Phantom 20 years ago, when it was nothing more than a theory scribbled on a whiteboard by a young physicist. Now that theory was reality, and it was going to change everything. He entered the main observation deck and found Dr. Sophie Hayes already there, standing in front of the massive window that overlooked the construction bay. Sophie was younger than Kyle by 15 years, a brilliant scientist who had dedicated her entire adult life to this project. She wore a white lab coat over her uniform, and her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She didn't turn when Kyle approached, her eyes fixed on the ships floating in the bay beyond the window. Beautiful, aren't they? Sophie said quietly. Kyle looked at the ships. There were 50 of them, each one roughly the size of a traditional human destroyer, but that was where the similarities ended. These ships were sleek and dark, with hull plating that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. No visible weapons, no obvious engine ports, nothing that looked like conventional ship design. They looked alien, which was ironic considering they were the most human thing ever created. How long until they're ready? Kyle asked. They're ready now, Sophie replied. We completed the final tests yesterday. All 50 ships passed with perfect marks. The dark matter reactors are stable. The phase drives work exactly as designed. And the weapons, she paused, a slight smile on her face. The weapons are beyond anything the Council has ever seen. Kyle felt a weight lift from his shoulders. 20 years of work, trillions of dollars, thousands of scientists and engineers all working in absolute secrecy. It had been the greatest gamble in human history. If the Council had discovered the project, they would have destroyed it immediately. If the technology hadn't worked, humanity would have wasted 2 decades and countless resources on nothing. But it had worked. Against all odds, humanity had cracked the secret of dark matter manipulation. "Explain it to me one more time," Kyle said. "In simple terms." Sophie turned to face him. "Everything we can see, all the normal matter in the universe, only makes up about 5% of what exists. The rest is dark matter and dark energy. We can't see it, but it's there, and it has mass and power. What we did was find a way to interact with it, to use it. These ships can phase in and out of normal space by shifting into dark matter. When they're phased out, they're invisible, undetectable, and can move faster than anything bound by normal physics. When they phase back in, they can channel dark energy into weapons that bypass conventional shields and tear apart matter at the molecular level." Kyle nodded slowly. He had heard the explanation before, but it still amazed him. The Council thought they were technologically superior, because they had older civilizations, more time to develop. But they had become complacent, resting on technology that was thousands of years old. Humanity, desperate and young, had been forced to innovate. They had looked where no one else thought to look, and they had found something revolutionary. His communicator beeped. Kyle pulled it from his belt and read the message. It was from Earth, from President Carter himself. Just 3 words. "You are authorized." Kyle looked at Sophie. "Contact all ship commanders. Tell them it's time. We deploy in 6 hours." Sophie's expression became serious. She nodded and walked quickly toward the communication station. Kyle turned back to the window, watching the dark ships floating silently in the bay. 50 ships against 10,000. On paper, it was still suicide. But these weren't normal ships, and this wasn't a normal war. Humanity had been pushed to the edge. The Council had given them an ultimatum, expecting fear and surrender. Instead, they were about to learn why it was dangerous to corner a species known for their stubbornness and creativity. Jake Morrison and the Defiant would lead the conventional fleet into battle, drawing the Council's attention. Then Kyle and the Phantom Fleet would phase into existence and show the galaxy something it had never seen before. The countdown had begun. In 72 hours, either humanity would be free or they would be extinct. There would be no middle ground, no compromise, no surrender. Kyle closed his eyes and thought about his brother, a Marine serving aboard one of the conventional fleet ships. He thought about all the humans who would risk their lives in the coming battle. Then he opened his eyes and straightened his shoulders. "Let's make history," he whispered to the empty observation deck. The planet Concordia Prime gleamed like a jewel in the darkness of space. The entire world was one massive city, billions of buildings stacked on top of each other, reaching toward the sky. It was the capital of the Galactic Council, the center of their power, and home to trillions of beings from dozens of different species. Above the planet, space was filled with warships, more than had ever been gathered in one place in galactic history. Fleet Admiral Zextar stood in the command center of his flagship, the Eternal Glory, and felt satisfied. He was a Vryn, one of the oldest and most powerful species in the Council. His body was covered in blue scales that reflected the light from the holographic displays around him. 4 arms gestured as he directed his fleet into position, arranging them in perfect formations that had been used for thousands of years. 10,000 warships, each one capable of destroying a planet, all under his command. "Have the humans responded to our ultimatum?" Zextar asked, his voice a deep rumble that vibrated through the deck. One of his officers, a smaller Vryn with lighter scales, checked his console. "No response, Fleet Admiral. The deadline expires in 1 hour." Zextar laughed, a harsh sound that made several officers flinch. Of course they haven't responded. They know they cannot win. They are probably arguing among themselves right now, debating whether to fight and die quickly or surrender and live as our servants. Either way, today will be remembered as the day humanity learned their place in the galaxy. Around the command center, other officers joined in the laughter. The idea that humanity could pose any threat was absurd to them. The human ships used fusion drives, technology that the Council had abandoned 5,000 years ago. Human weapons were kinetic projectiles and simple energy beams, like throwing rocks compared to the Council's advanced plasma and antimatter weapons. In every simulation, in every war game, humanity lost within minutes. On Earth, in a bunker deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, President Daniel Carter sat at the head of a long table surrounded by his cabinet and military advisors. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of air circulation systems. On the wall screens, news feeds from around the world showed crowds gathering in cities, some praying, some protesting, some simply standing together in silence. Everyone knew what was about to happen. "Mr. President," said General Patricia Cole, the head of Earth's defense forces, "the conventional fleet is in position. 300 ships ready to engage. Admiral Bennett confirms the Phantom fleet is also ready and standing by in dark space. They're waiting for your final authorization." Daniel looked around the table at the faces of the men and women who helped him lead humanity. Some looked scared, others determined, all of them tired. They had spent the last 3 days debating, planning, arguing. Some had wanted to negotiate further, to try to find a peaceful solution. Others had wanted to surrender, arguing that survival was more important than pride. But in the end, the decision had been clear. "I've been thinking about our history," Daniel said quietly, "about all the times humans faced impossible odds. When our ancestors were nearly wiped out by ice ages, when we fought wars that threatened to destroy our entire civilization, when we pushed out into space even though we didn't know what we would find. We survived all of that because we refused to give up. We refused to let anyone tell us we couldn't do something." He stood up, placing his hands on the table. "The Council thinks we're primitive. They think we're weak. They think that because they're older, they're better. But they forgot something important. Young species are dangerous because they have nothing to lose and everything to prove. We're going to remind them of that today." Daniel picked up a small communicator and pressed the button. "Admiral Bennett, you are authorized to deploy the Phantom fleet. Show them what humanity can do." On the other side of the communication, Kyle Bennett received the message and allowed himself a small smile. "Understood, Mr. President. Initiating Operation Ghost Strike." Aboard the Defiant, Jake Morrison received his orders. The conventional fleet was to jump to Concordia Prime and engage the Council fleet directly. They were the distraction, the bait that would draw all attention while the Phantom fleet moved into position. Jake knew that many of the ships in his fleet wouldn't survive. He knew that he was sending good people to their deaths, but he also knew that their sacrifice would give humanity a chance. "All ships, this is Commander Morrison," he said over the fleet-wide channel. "We have our orders. In 10 minutes we jump to Concordia Prime. I won't lie to you. The Council has more ships, bigger weapons, stronger shields. On paper we can't win. But we're not fighting to win. We're fighting to survive. We're fighting so that our children won't have to bow to anyone. We're fighting because we're human and humans don't surrender." He paused, looking around at his bridge crew. Lieutenant Amy Foster at the tactical station, young and scared but trying not to show it. Lieutenant Pete Johnson at weapons, checking his targeting systems one more time. Commander Sarah Blake at navigation, her hands steady on the controls. All of them ready to do their duty, even knowing the odds. "Every species in the galaxy is watching right now," Jake continued. "They're watching to see if humanity will fold, if we'll accept our place as inferior. Let's show them something different. Let's show them that humans might not have the oldest civilization or the biggest empire, but we have something they lost a long time ago. We have the courage to stand up and fight no matter the cost." All ships prepare to jump. The fleet of 300 human ships activated their jump drives simultaneously. Space twisted and folded, and then they were gone, hurtling through the fabric of reality toward Concordia Prime. In the hidden facility, Sophie Hayes sat in the cockpit of the Wraith, the flagship of the Phantom fleet. Unlike the conventional ships, the Phantom ships didn't need large crews. The dark matter systems were so advanced that a ship could be operated by just 10 people. Sophie wasn't officially military, but she had insisted on being present for the first combat deployment of her technology. Kyle had agreed, making her the science officer aboard the Wraith. Around her, the other 49 Phantom ships powered up their dark matter reactors. The space around them began to shimmer and distort as they prepared to phase out of normal space. Sophie checked her readings one more time, making sure everything was perfect. This was it. 20 years of work was about to be tested in actual combat. "All ships report ready," came the voice of Captain Greg Palmer, the Wraith's commander. He was a veteran pilot who had flown everything from fighters to battleships in his 30-year career. When Kyle had asked for volunteers to fly the Phantom ships, Greg had been the first to raise his hand. "Take us to dark space," Kyle ordered from his position behind the captain's chair. "All ships maintain formation. We phase in 30 seconds after the conventional fleet engages. Hit them hard and fast, targeting their capital ships first. Show no mercy, because they won't show us any. The Wraith and the rest of the Phantom fleet began to fade from normal space. To an outside observer, it would look like the ships were dissolving into nothing, becoming transparent before vanishing completely. But the ships weren't gone. They had shifted into dark matter, becoming part of the invisible fabric of the universe. They could still move, still see, still target enemies, but they were undetectable by any conventional sensors. Sophie felt a strange sensation as the phase drive engaged, like falling and floating at the same time. Her instruments showed they had successfully transitioned. They were now existing in both normal space and dark space simultaneously, a state that should have been impossible according to the old laws of physics. But they had rewritten those laws. Back on Concordia Prime, Zextar watched as his sensors detected the human fleet emerging from their jump. He counted the ships quickly. 300, just as intelligence had predicted. They were arranging themselves into a simple attack formation, charging directly toward his fleet. "They're attacking?" one of his officers said in disbelief. "They must be insane." Zextar felt a moment of something strange, not fear but uncertainty. Why would the humans attack if they knew they couldn't win? Was this a suicide mission? Some kind of desperate last stand? Or was there something else happening? He dismissed the thought quickly. It didn't matter. Whatever the humans were planning, it wouldn't save them. All ships open fire. Destroy them all. The space around Concordia Prime erupted in fire and light. 10,000 Council warships opened fire simultaneously, launching plasma beams and antimatter missiles at the incoming human fleet. The barrage was so intense that it looked like a wall of pure energy racing across the void. Jake Morrison watched from the Defiance bridge as the first wave of weapons approached his ships. "Evasive maneuvers, all ships scatter formation," he ordered, his voice calm despite the chaos. The human ships broke apart, each one following predetermined patterns designed to make targeting more difficult. But there were simply too many enemy weapons. The first human ship, the destroyer Courage, took a direct hit from 3 plasma beams at once. Its shields collapsed instantly, and the hull exploded in a brilliant flash of white light. "Courage is down," Amy Foster reported from the tactical station, her voice tight with emotion. "Defenders and Pride are also hit, heavy damage. They're falling back." More explosions lit up the view screen as Council weapons found their targets. The human ships were firing back, their kinetic cannons and energy beams striking Council vessels, but the damage was minimal. The Council shields absorbed most of the impact, and even when a shot got through, the heavily armored Council ships could take the punishment. It was exactly what the wargame simulations had predicted. The human fleet was being torn apart. "Keep pushing forward," Jake ordered. "We need to keep their attention. Make them think we're the only threat." On the Council flagship, Zextar watched the battle with satisfaction. The human ships were fighting bravely. He had to admit that much. They weren't running, weren't trying to retreat. But bravery meant nothing against superior firepower. In the first 2 minutes of combat, the humans had lost 30 ships. At this rate, the battle would be over in less than 10 minutes. "Focus fire on their command ships," Zextar ordered. "Once we destroy their leadership, the rest will break and run." His weapons officer began targeting the larger human ships, including the Defiant. Multiple Council dreadnoughts turned their attention to Jake's ship, charging their main plasma cannons. Zextar smiled, already anticipating victory. Then his sensor officer made a sound of confusion. "Fleet Admiral, I'm detecting spatial anomalies throughout the battlefield. Multiple points, at least 50. I can't identify what they are." Zextar frowned. "Anomalies? What kind?" "Unknown, sir. They appeared suddenly, and they're not matching any known signatures. It's almost like space itself is tearing open." Before Zextar could respond, the anomalies resolved. 50 dark shapes materialized out of nothing, appearing in the middle of his fleet formation. They were ships, but unlike any ships he had ever seen. They were sleek and black, with no visible weapons or engines, and they moved with impossible grace. The Phantom fleet had arrived. Aboard the Wraith, Kyle Bennett watched his tactical display light up with targets. They were surrounded by Council ships, which was exactly where they wanted to be. All Phantom ships weapons-free. Target capital ships fire at will. The Phantom ships opened fire, and the Council fleet learned what true fear felt like. Dark energy beams lanced out from the human vessels, weapons that operated on principles the Council didn't understand. When the beams hit Council ships, something terrifying happened. The shields didn't just fail, they seemed to dissolve as if they had never existed. The dark energy passed through the defensive barriers like they were made of air and struck the hull beneath. The first council dreadnought to be hit, the Infinite Justice, simply came apart. The dark energy beam touched its hull, and the molecular bonds holding the ship together ceased to exist. The massive vessel, over 2 kilometers long and built to survive attacks that could destroy planets, dissolved into its component atoms in less than 3 seconds. One moment it was there, the next it was just a cloud of expanding particles. What was that? Sextar roared, staring at his screen in disbelief. What kind of weapon was that? His sensor officer was frantically checking his instruments. I don't know, Fleet Admiral. The readings don't make sense. It's like they're using dark energy itself as a weapon. Our shields aren't designed to stop that. Nothing is designed to stop that. Another council ship exploded, then another. The phantom ships moved through the council formation like ghosts, appearing in one location, firing, then vanishing and reappearing somewhere else. Their phase drives allowed them to shift in and out of normal space in seconds, making them nearly impossible to target. Council ships tried to return fire, but their weapons passed through empty space where a human ship had been just moments before. Jake Morrison watched from the Defiant as the council fleet fell into chaos. The phantom ships were doing exactly what they were designed to do, turning the tide of battle in seconds. All conventional ships press the attack, he ordered. Target the ships that are distracted by the phantom fleet. Hit them while their attention is divided. The remaining human conventional ships surged forward, their weapons now finding targets whose shields were dropping as the phantom ships tore through the council formation. Amy Foster coordinated the attack from the Defiant, marking targets and directing fire. 2 council cruisers dead ahead, shields are down, target them now. The Defiant's main cannons fired, kinetic rounds traveling at a fraction of light speed. They struck the council cruisers and punched through the armor, causing massive internal explosions. The cruisers broke apart, adding to the growing field of debris. Aboard the Eclipse, one of the Phantom destroyers, Commander Jake Morrison's friend Lieutenant Steve Baker was having the time of his life. He had been reassigned to the Phantom fleet just a month ago, after the conventional fleet commanders realized they needed experienced combat officers. Now he understood why. The Eclipse moved like nothing he had ever flown before, responding to his thoughts as much as his controls. Target the battleship on our left, Steve ordered his weapons officer, Lieutenant Pete Johnson, who had also been transferred to the Phantom fleet. Full power, let's see how much damage we can do. Pete locked onto the target and fired. The dark energy beam struck the Council battleship and its shields vanished like morning mist. The beam continued through, carving a line across the ship's hull. Secondary explosions rippled along the cut, and the battleship began to list to one side, venting atmosphere and flames. Target destroyed, moving to the next one, Pete reported, already scanning for their next victim. The Eclipse phased out of normal space, vanishing from the Council sensors and moved through dark space to a new position. When it phased back in, it was behind a group of Council frigates. Steve smiled and gave the order to fire again. Sextar was screaming orders, trying to restore order to his fleet, but it was impossible. The Phantom ships were everywhere and nowhere, appearing without warning, destroying ships, then vanishing before anyone could react. His fleet of 10,000 ships was being torn apart by just 50 human vessels. It was impossible. It was unthinkable. It was happening. Get me a firing solution on any of those ships, he demanded. I don't care how, just do it. His weapons officer tried, coordinating with dozens of other ships to create overlapping fields of fire. They managed to track one of the Phantom ships, a destroyer that had just destroyed its 4th Council vessel. Multiple ships fired at once, hundreds of plasma beams converging on a single point. The Phantom destroyer, the Shadow, took the full force of the barrage. Its dark matter shields held for a moment, then collapsed. The ship's hull breached in multiple places and it began to lose power. But even dying, the Shadow's crew managed to fire one last shot, destroying a Council cruiser before their ship exploded. We got one, Zextar's weapons officer reported, a note of hope in his voice. One, Zextar repeated bitterly. We destroyed one of their ships and they've destroyed over 200 of ours. This isn't a battle, it's a massacre. Sophie Hayes watched the tactical display from the Wraith, monitoring the performance of all the Phantom ships. The loss of the Shadow hurt, but the mission was succeeding beyond their best projections. The Council fleet was in complete disarray, ships breaking formation and trying to escape. Some were attempting to jump away, but the Phantom ships were targeting their jump drives first, trapping them in the combat zone. Their flagship is trying to organize a defensive formation, Captain Palmer reported. Should we take it out? Kyle considered for a moment. Taking out the enemy flagship would be a symbolic victory, but it might also cause the entire Council fleet to collapse into retreat. He wanted them to feel this defeat completely, to understand that humanity was not to be trifled with. Do it, Kyle ordered. Target the Eternal Glory. Show them that nothing is safe, not even their fleet admiral. The Wraith and 5 other Phantom ships converged on Zextar's flagship. They phased in around it, forming a circle, and opened fire simultaneously. 6 dark energy beams struck the Eternal Glory from different angles. The massive flagship's shields dissolved, and the beams carved through the hull like knives through paper. Explosions rippled across the ship's surface as critical systems failed. Zextar felt his ship dying around him. Alarms blared, lights flickered, and he could hear the screams of his crew over the communication channels. He had lived for over 300 years, commanded fleets for 2. The space around Concordia Prime was filled with wreckage. Thousands of destroyed Council warships drifted in broken pieces, creating a field of debris that stretched for millions of kilometers. Emergency beacons flashed from escape pods, distress signals crying out for rescue that wouldn't come. The proud Council fleet, assembled to crush humanity, had been reduced to scrap metal in less than 3 hours. Kyle Bennett stood on the bridge of the Wraith, watching the tactical display. Of the 10,000 Council ships that had started the battle, fewer than 2,000 remained, and most of those were trying to flee. The Phantom fleet had lost only the Shadow, with all other ships reporting minor damage at worst. It was the most one-sided victory in the history of space warfare. Sir, we're receiving multiple surrender requests from Council ships, reported the communications officer, Lieutenant Maria Cruz. They're asking for terms. Kyle shook his head. No terms, not yet. Tell them to power down their weapons and hold position. Any ship that tries to jump away will be destroyed. He turned to Captain Palmer. Bring us around. Target the planetary defense platforms. It's time to finish this. Concordia Prime loomed ahead, a world-spanning city that represented everything the Council had built over thousands of years. Orbiting the planet were defense platforms, massive structures the size of small moons, armed with weapons powerful enough to crack continents. There were 12 of them, 1 for each Council species, and they had defended the capital world for millennia. No enemy had ever gotten close enough to threaten them, until now. The Phantom fleet reformed, all 49 remaining ships arranging themselves in a precise formation. They moved toward the planet, and the defense platforms immediately activated, their weapons powering up. Energy readings spiked as the platforms charged their main cannons, weapons that could destroy entire fleets with a single shot. Platforms are targeting us, Amy Foster reported from the tactical station. She had transferred to the Wraith after the Defiant took heavy damage, serving now as Kyle's tactical coordinator. They're charging antimatter cannons. Estimated time to firing, 45 seconds. All ships, evasive pattern Delta, Kyle ordered. Don't give them a clear shot. Sophie, are the calculations ready? Sophie Hayes looked up from her console, her fingers still flying over the controls. She had been working on a coordinated strike pattern, using the Phantom fleet's ability to phase in and out of space to hit all 12 platforms simultaneously. It was complex, requiring split-second timing, but if it worked, they could take out all the defenses at once. Calculations are complete and uploaded to all ships, Sophie confirmed. Everyone has their assigned target. We'll need to phase out, move to position in dark space, then phase in and fire within a 2-second window. If we're off by even a second, some platforms will have time to fire. We've done harder things today, Kyle said with a slight smile. All ships execute Sophie's plan on my mark. 3, 2, 1 mark. The Phantom fleet vanished from normal space, phasing into the dark matter dimension. The defense platforms lost their targets, their sensors showing nothing but empty space where the human ships had been. On the planet below, billions of Council citizens watched the sky through their windows and on their screens, wondering if the humans had retreated. Then the Phantom fleet reappeared, but not where they had been before. Each ship had moved through dark space to position itself directly in front of one of the defense platforms, so close that the platform's long-range weapons couldn't target them. The humans had moved inside the defensive perimeter in an instant. All ships, fire, Kyle commanded. 49 dark energy beams lanced out simultaneously, 12 of them converging on each of the 12 platforms. The platform's shields, designed to withstand any conventional weapon, dissolved under the dark energy assault. The beams punched through the armor and found the platform's power cores. 12 massive explosions lit up the orbit of Concordia Prime, creating a chain of light that could be seen from the planet's surface. In less than 5 seconds, the defenses that had protected the Council's capital for thousands of years were gone. On the surface of Concordia Prime, in the towering council chambers that served as the seat of galactic government, Krelthax watched the destruction through the chamber's transparent dome. He was the supreme arbiter of the council, a being made of living crystal that stood 3 meters tall and refracted light into rainbow patterns. He had held his position for 500 years, guiding council policy with wisdom and authority. Now he watched as that authority crumbled before his eyes. "Get me a communication channel to the human fleet," he ordered, his voice resonating like music through crystal. Immediately, his aide, a smaller crystalline being, worked frantically at a console. "Channel open, Supreme Arbiter. The humans are responding." Captain Lisa Warren's face appeared on the screen. She had transferred to one of the Phantom ships during the battle, and now she stood on the bridge of the Midnight, serving as humanity's voice in this final confrontation. Behind her, the stars were visible through the view screen, along with the glow of burning wreckage. "Supreme Arbiter," Lisa said, her voice cold and formal. "You wish to speak?" Krelthax felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries: fear. "Captain Warren, I am prepared to negotiate. The Council is willing to offer humanity a full seat at the table, equal status with all member species. We can discuss reparations, trade agreements, territorial expansion. Anything you want, we can negotiate." Lisa's expression didn't change. "You misunderstand the situation, Supreme Arbiter. We're not here to negotiate for a seat at your table. We're here to tell you that your table no longer exists. The Galactic Council is finished." "You can't be serious," Krelthax said, his voice rising in pitch. "The Council has governed the galaxy for 10,000 years. We maintain peace, coordinate trade, resolve disputes. Without the Council, there will be chaos." "The Council maintained its own power," Lisa corrected. "You suppressed technological development in younger species to keep them dependent on you. You hoarded resources and controlled trade to benefit yourselves. You treated entire civilizations as subjects rather than equals. That ends today." She leaned forward, her eyes hard. "You have 1 hour to order all remaining Council military forces to stand down and surrender. All Council ships, all ground forces, all defensive installations. After that hour, we will begin targeting government facilities on Concordia Prime and every other Council world. We will dismantle your government piece by piece until you comply." "This is madness," Krelthax protested. "You can't govern the entire galaxy. You're one species." "We're not going to govern the galaxy," Lisa replied. "Each species will govern themselves as equals. But we will ensure that no single power ever again holds absolute authority. Your age is over, Supreme Arbiter. Accept it peacefully or we'll make you accept it by force." The screen went dark, leaving Krelthax staring at his own reflection in the blank display. Around him, the other council members began arguing, their voices rising in panic and anger. Some wanted to fight, to marshal what remained of their forces and continue the war. Others wanted to surrender, to save what they could. The Council, which had always spoken with one voice, was fracturing. In space above the planet, Jake Morrison had transferred to command of the Eclipse after its previous commander was promoted. He brought the Phantom Destroyer into position directly above the Council chambers, close enough that the people inside could see his ship through their dome. The Eclipse hung there like a dark sword over their heads, a silent reminder of humanity's power. "Target lock confirmed," Pete Johnson reported from the weapons station. He had stayed with Jake during the transfer, the two of them working together so well that separating them would have been foolish. "One shot would go right through their shields and take out the entire building." "Hold fire," Jake ordered. "Let them see us. Let them think about what happens if they make the wrong choice." Inside the council chambers, Krelthax looked up at the human ship hovering above them. Through the dark hull, he could see the faint glow of its weapons charging, ready to fire at a moment's notice. The Supreme Arbiter, who had commanded the respect of thousands of species, who had shaped the fate of worlds with his decisions, felt very small under that dark shadow. "Open a channel," he said quietly. to all council forces. Tell them to stand down. His aide hesitated. Supreme Arbiter, if we surrender, the council will cease to exist. Everything we've built will be lost. Krelthax looked around at the other council members, seeing the fear in their expressions, the realization that their era had ended. Better to lose what we built than to lose everything. Issue the order. The command went out across thousands of light years, reaching every council ship, every base, every outpost. Stand down, surrender, the war was over. Some refused, choosing to fight to the bitter end. The Phantom Fleet hunted them down efficiently and without mercy. Within hours, the last resistance was crushed. Kyle Bennett received the confirmation reports and allowed himself to relax for the first time in days. They had done it. Against all odds, with 50 ships against 10,000, humanity had won. The galaxy would never be the same. Get me a secure channel to President Carter, Kyle ordered. Tell him it's... 3 weeks after the Battle of Concordia Prime, President Daniel Carter stood before the largest gathering of alien species in galactic history. The meeting was held not on Concordia Prime, but on a neutral world called Haven, a beautiful planet with purple skies and 3 moons that had never been claimed by any empire. Representatives from over 200 species filled the massive amphitheater, some sitting, some floating, some existing in energy forms that required special containment fields. Daniel took a deep breath and began to speak. His words translated into hundreds of languages simultaneously. For thousands of years, the Galactic Council governed this galaxy. They brought order, they maintained peace, and they built great things. But they also suppressed freedom, hoarded power, and treated younger species as children who needed guidance. That era's over. Today we begin something new. He paused, looking out at the diverse crowd. Some faces showed hope, others fear, and many showed simple confusion. The galaxy had been shaken to its core, and no one was quite sure what came next. Humanity did not fight the Council to take their place, Daniel continued. We fought them because they gave us no choice. They demanded our surrender, our freedom, our future. We said no, and in saying no, we discovered that the Council's power was built on a lie. The lie that they were superior, that their technology and their age made them better than everyone else. We proved that wrong. In the front row, Krelthax listened to the human president's words. The former Supreme Arbiter was now just another delegate, stripped of his authority. His crystal form had lost some of its luster, dimmed by stress and shame, but he was here, listening, trying to understand this new reality. The Galactic Assembly will be different from the Council, Daniel explained. Every species, regardless of age or size, gets an equal vote on matters that affect the galaxy as a whole. No one species, no coalition of species will have absolute power. We will make decisions together as equals. Kyle Bennett stood at the back of the amphitheater, wearing his formal uniform with all his medals. Next to him was Sophie Hayes, who had been promoted to Chief Science Advisor for Humanity. They watched Daniel's speech and the reactions from the alien delegates. Do you think they'll accept it? Sophie asked quietly. Some of them look angry, Kyle shrugged. They don't have much choice. The Phantom Fleet is in orbit above us, along with ships from 50 other species who supported our action against the Council. Anyone who wants to argue can try, but I don't think they'll like the results. It was true. The Battle of Concordia Prime had sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Dozens of species that had been suppressed by the Council had declared their independence. Others had formed new alliances, seeking protection from whoever might try to take the Council's place. The galaxy was reorganizing itself, and humanity was at the center of that reorganization, whether they wanted to be or not. After the assembly, Daniel met privately with several key delegates in a smaller conference room. Admiral Kyle Bennett joined him, along with Captain Lisa Warren, who had become humanity's primary diplomat to the new assembly. The delegates included Krelthax, representing the crystalline species, a Vryn named Torval who had taken over after Zextar's capture, and representatives from 6 other major species. We need to discuss the technology restrictions, Torval said, his blue scales reflecting the room's soft lighting. The Council had rules about what types of weapons could be developed. Dark matter weapons were explicitly forbidden, yet humanity developed them anyway. Because the Council wanted to keep us weak, Lisa responded firmly. Those restrictions weren't about safety, they were about control. The Council suppressed any technology that might threaten their dominance. Sophie stepped forward carrying a data tablet. I've been reviewing the Council's scientific records. Over the past 2,000 years, they classified over 50 major technological breakthroughs as forbidden research. Dark matter manipulation, quantum consciousness transfer, dimensional folding, temporal mechanics. All of these were marked as too dangerous to pursue. But when I looked deeper, I found the real reason. They were scared. Scared that if younger species developed these technologies, the Council wouldn't be special anymore. She activated a holographic display that showed graphs and equations. Dark matter technology wasn't even that difficult to develop. With the right theoretical framework, any species could have done it within a century. But the Council made sure no one had that framework. They destroyed research, suppressed scientists, and created laws that made it illegal to even think about these topics. They held back the entire galaxy for thousands of years. Krelthax's crystal form pulsed with dim colors. You don't understand. We saw what happened when species developed too quickly. Wars that destroyed solar systems, weapons that could tear apart reality itself. We created those restrictions to protect everyone. You created those restrictions to protect yourselves, Kyle said bluntly. And in doing so, you made the galaxy weaker. Humanity faced extinction, so we had no choice but to innovate. We couldn't afford to follow your rules, and because we broke those rules, we survived. How many other species might have survived their challenges if they had been allowed to develop freely? The room fell silent. It was a difficult question, one that had no easy answer. Finally, a delegate named Dr. Venn, a floating energy being from a species called the Lumina, spoke up. Perhaps the solution is not to ban technologies, but to share them. If humanity's dark matter research had been known to the Council, they might have been able to develop defenses. Secrecy and suppression create the exact dangers they're meant to prevent. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. That's the approach we want to take. Open research, shared knowledge, but with ethical guidelines that everyone agrees on, not rules imposed from above, but standards we create together. Over the next 3 weeks, the framework for the new Galactic Assembly was established. Every species would have representation. Major decisions required a majority vote. Technology would be openly shared, with ethics committees to evaluate potential dangers. Military forces would be limited, with no single species allowed to maintain a fleet larger than 10,000 ships. And humanity would maintain the Phantom Fleet as an enforcement mechanism, a guarantee that no one could seize power the way the Council had. Not everyone was happy with the new order. Some species preferred the old ways, when their status was guaranteed by Council decree. Others feared that humanity would become the new Council, using their superior technology to dominate. But most recognized that change was necessary, and that this new system, imperfect as it was, offered hope for a more equitable future. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Eclipse, now officially designated as a patrol vessel for the Assembly. His mission was to travel to disputed regions, showing the flag and reminding everyone that the new order would be enforced. It wasn't the combat role he had trained for, but it was important work. Course laid in for the Outer Rim, Lieutenant Amy Foster reported from navigation. She had chosen to stay with Jake, turning down a promotion to serve on a larger ship. 3 systems have reported pirate activity. They're requesting our assistance. Take us there, Jake ordered. Let's show them what the Assembly can do. The Eclipse activated its phase drive and vanished into dark space, traveling faster than any conventional ship could follow. Minutes later, it emerged in the Outer Rim where a small colony was under attack by raiders. The raiders saw the Phantom ship appear and immediately began broadcasting surrender requests. They had heard the stories about the Battle of Concordia Prime, and they had no desire to fight a ship that could tear apart Council dreadnoughts. On Earth, life was returning to normal, or at least a new version of normal. The planet that had been on the brink of extinction was now the most influential world in the galaxy. Ships from dozens of species came to Earth every day, seeking trade agreements, technology exchanges, or just to see the home of the species that had changed everything. Sophie Hayes returned to Earth between assignments, visiting the university where she had first theorized dark matter manipulation 20 years ago. Students crowded around her asking questions, wanting to know how she had done it. She told them the truth, desperation, curiosity, and a refusal to accept that something was impossible just because everyone said it was. The Council told us that dark matter couldn't be controlled, she explained, to a lecture hall full of eager young scientists. They said the math didn't work. that the energy requirements were too high, that it would never be practical. And for a while I believed them. But then I started asking a different question. Not could it be done, but why hadn't it been done? And when I dug into that question, I found that the research had been suppressed, not because it was impossible, but because the council was afraid of it. She smiled at the students. That's the lesson I want you to take away. When someone tells you something is impossible, ask yourself if they're telling you the truth or if they're just scared of what you might discover. The galaxy is full of mysteries, and now we're finally free to explore them without anyone telling us not to. Admiral Kyle Bennett retired from active service 6 months after the battle, turning over command of the Phantom Fleet to younger officers. He